USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
My name is Rick Beech. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I now live in Sally Beach, Florida. I retired out of Patrick, and so after I got out of the military, I kept on with my career and decided I never wanted to leave. I grew up in more of a rural area outside of Pittsburgh, and when they brought the draft back in 1968, I had a very low number. I was number 76, so I determined that either I get drafted or I take another path. So my brother was already in the Army, so I come home and I said, what should I do? And he told me to join the Air Force. So I went down to the recruiter, came into the guaranteed job program, and joined the Air Force in 1971, right out of high school. It was delayed enlistment, so I really actually didn't leave until almost early 1973. And then when I finally got the call up, then I went into basic training in 1973, and then stayed in the military until 1993. So I did 20 years. When I left for boot camp, after once again asking my brother how his boot camp was, I went to Lackland, and it was pretty much straightforward. Nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, I went through scouting. I was an Eagle Scout, so the whole camping thing was nothing new to me. But basic training was somewhat of a challenge. However, back then, because we're still in the Vietnam era, it probably was not as intense as it could have been, because they were trying to get people through basic, just in case. It was pretty much uneventful, but I left there and then went to Shepherd for my technical school. And
where is this at exactly?
Shepherd Air Force Base, okay, in Wichita Falls.
We defend the future of our nation and our allies. We deliver air power. Our strategic advantage isn't cutting-edge technology. Our strategic advantage is airmen. And building airmen is our mission, our calling, our passion. We change the world by training 65,000 airmen every year to be pilots, maintainers, civil engineers, logisticians, nuclear operators, to be airmen. That's why we say at Shepherd, combat capability starts here. Air power, anytime, anywhere.
When I left Shepherd, my first assignment was at Webb Air Force Base in Big Spring, Texas. And at that very time, we were training Iranian pilots. And I would do touch and goes with those pilots when they were doing their T-37s. And that was an experience as well. And I stayed at Webb for almost 2 years. And then I took a special duty assignment. Well, it wasn't special duty, it was just a special assignment over to Germany. I went to Germany for 3 years. My job in the Air Force at that time, I was considered tactical environmental control. So everything that we took out on trailers to the site all had to be air conditioned. So it was up to me and my crew to go out and ensure that the scopes were adequately maintained or were cooled sufficiently with their equipment so they operate. And all of our communications was also air conditioned. So we did that. We did tactical air conditioning.
What was your rate or your rank at this point?
When I was at Patrick here, I was a tech sergeant. And I left Patrick and then took a special duty assignment up in Ohio in public affairs. And that job entailed, we took mobile theater vans to colleges and high schools. The high schools were aimed at getting the kids a little futuristic look at what we offered and what the future of the military was going to be, i.e. Air Force and whatnot. But we also recruited doctors and nurses. And that's what I was doing because I was a volunteer paramedic. And when they sent me up there, I would go out and talk to prospective nurses and medical students about what the military specifically had to offer. And then in the summertime, we would take static aircraft on display, F-15s, F-16s, we had an F-4. We would trailer those out and set them up at a venue such as a state fair where people could see, and we would introduce the Air Force to what the public would normally never get to see because we had an actual aircraft there. And we did that. I did that for almost 6 years. And we would go to places where normally they didn't see a lot of the military. A lot of these states were back in the rural areas where they never saw an aircraft or a van or didn't know anything about it. That's what we would do. We'd go out there and, as a public affairs division, we would explain the Air Force. And during that time, as I mentioned before, I was called because while I was active duty Air Force, I was an entertainer. I was a musician. And we had an organization within the Air Force called Air Force Entertainment and a traveling show group called Tops and Blue. And they would select people out of a worldwide talent program to put a show together. We would go to Lackland, put this show together, then we would take it out on the road to the entire Air Force, stateside and either Europe or Asia, depending on the year, would alternate. So I also did that. I had an opportunity to be a technical director for that as a musician, and that was great. And then in 1985, we did the Super Bowl halftime show.
This must have been exciting.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. We went all the way. It was staged out in Mather Air Force Base in California, and then the show was at Stanford Stadium.
Super Bowl XIX Dream Spectacular. Dreams express the hopes and goals of all people. Dreams are only possible in a land where people are free to make those dreams come true. Without freedom, dreams can never be realized.
What difference if I hear from north or south, or from the east or west? My heart is filled with love. And deep within my breast, I thrill to see your glory, thank the breeze. This is my country, land of my birth. This is my country, grandest on earth. I pledge thee my allegiance, America. To have and to hold.
The show, the particular year show, would be theme-based, and my tour did the Wizard of Oz. So I retired in 1993, and then while I was active duty, I applied to the State Department. And in 1994, I was selected, and so I went to Washington and went through all of the training, and then I left in May of 1994 and spent the next 25 years with the State Department. My first assignment was in Greece, and I was there for 3 years. Then I went to Jakarta, Indonesia, and then I was responsible for all of China. I went to China. I came back out of China to the Bahamas, and then I was eligible to retire. And I put my papers in because I did not get the forward assignment that I wanted because it was a medical issue with the people that were there, so they stayed there. So I decided to retire. I was so close, I brought the family back to here, because Florida. But then we had a program in the department called WAE, so even though I retired, they brought me back. So even though I physically got out in 1993 and then joined the department, in 2003, that's when I retired, but then they brought me back. And so I stayed from 2003 to 2019 doing the very same job. But then that took me to many places in Africa, Libya,
What actual work were you doing? What did it
I was a
entail?
maintenance officer, and so I would actually be responsible for maintaining the infrastructure and all the operations and maintenance at the embassies. So embassies were varied in size, and I went to, I'll back up a bit to 2003. When I got out initially the first year, I deployed to Afghanistan to help construct the new embassy in Kabul. I was over there for a year, and so we did what we did, and then I left there, and then that's when I jumped back into the more permanent thing with the department. But I want to say that they would use me based on my department experience working on an embassy project with a contractor to make sure that things were going correctly for our perspective. Yeah, but it was under the employment of the company itself. I did that, and then I come back, stayed with the department for a few more assignments, and then I got called back again to go to Iraq. So I went to Iraq, to Balad. We helped move some of our assets from Balad up to Erbil, and I spent almost a year doing that as well. Left Iraq, and then the department called me back. So I come back, did a few assignments. Then a colleague of mine said, hey, I want to consider going to Afghanistan. So I did. So I went to Afghanistan, and I was working in Kabul at a FOB Blackhorse. And it was more or less a training area for Afghans with American oversight. And I did the very same thing. I went there and just was involved in projects that was in the best interest of that particular post. Then I went to another FOB in Afghanistan the same year. And that was at FOB Shank. And that was, if you look at the history of the war, that was the most attacked FOB in the entire war in the country.
That was that one. That was here. That was close. That was right here. Right, it hit right there. Yeah. Hey, get your ass back in here.
They referred to it as Missile City, and when I departed, I survived almost 90 rocket attacks when I pulled out. And I came home from Afghanistan in 2013, continued once again with the department all over. And then I finally decided to call it quits in 2019.
What was the most harrowing, scary thing that you might recall, or one of them that you could share with us that was one of the worst times maybe?
At FOB Shank, in 2 years I was there, we lost 135 people. And when the incoming alarm would go off, all you could do is get under your desk, put your gear on, wait for it to clear. In my tent, right next to my bed, I had a sarcophagus made out of sandbags. It was harrowing because you could literally see where they were launching from, and I actually saw several times, I saw them coming. And it wasn't until 2 months before I departed that they installed CRAM batteries to shoot down the incoming rockets. And right after that, they closed that FOB, and then they reopened it. And so that was, and we would launch Predator drones out of there. We would launch some Mosquito drones out of there. We had a whole host of things. Everybody within the war effort was located there, and I think that's why it was such a targeted area. But I developed a good relationship with my Afghans that I had there, to the point that if they came to me on any particular day and said, we're not coming in tomorrow, then I would call the Tactical Operations Center and say, hey, my guys aren't coming tomorrow. So they knew that something was brewing. So they would take the necessary steps. The most scary occasion, I think, is when they concealed themselves in a tractor trailer fuel tank and tried to breach the FOB. And they could not get in, so they detonated right there at the entry point. But they didn't know that on the other side of that fence, that those HESCO barriers was Afghan vendors selling things. But it was such a massive explosion that they killed everybody in that line and blew it all back to Charlie Med, and that was pretty devastating. So we had to move the access control point from there all the way to the opposite end of the FOB, where anybody who was coming into that FOB had to be a good mile and a half away. But it's still, it was pretty dicey. And when I went on R&R, we had built a new office building because they kept getting closer with the rockets. And when I went on R&R, they were just finishing my building. And while I was gone, we took a rocket attack, came right through the roof of the building, maybe within 5 feet of where I would have been sitting in the office. But the good news was that we hadn't occupied yet, and they didn't know that. So they were zeroing in, because they could see it. They could see the building being constructed. They figured somebody's going to be in there. Well, they launched too soon. If they had waited maybe another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, much different.
A lot of casualties.
Yeah. The fact that we were the most attacked FOB, this was a typical, what you would see if we did get an attack. And this just happened to be, again, very fortunate for us, because rocket hit, went into the gym. And because of the time it hit, there was nobody in there. But if that had been packed full of guys in there working out, it would have been a whole different story. And typically when these rockets hit, they come down and then they splay out this way. So anything that's in that area is pretty much not, for whatever reason, we never seemed to get attacked at lunchtime. I don't know why that was, but we did this time. And we always thought that if a rocket hit the DFAC, it would have been catastrophic. But it did not. But it did hit the area where the troops were. And it was my responsibility to go out after the UXOs had been cleared and everything was deemed safe, to go out and survey the damage and do whatever we had to do to rectify the site. So I did. And in this particular case, 2 pilots were still in their tent when they took a rocket attack. So I went in, looked around, and I happened to see a photo up on the wall. And it was a pilot that I had a chat with at the DFAC, seemed like a week before. And I remembered it distinctly because he told me that he was in the Marine Corps and he got out and joined the Army because he was over there to fly Apaches. And his tent mate was flying Blackhawks. And I didn't know after the attack at that particular time that it was him until after we were doing the cleanup several days later. And I saw the photo. So that cemented my desire to not only honor him and his tent mate, but to honor them all. So, because you would go into the DFAC and you see we've had all the photos on the wall of everybody we had lost. And you couldn't miss it because you go in there and you pass by, and they did have those 2 guys' pictures on there after a few days later. And throughout the entire FOB, no matter where you were, they would sound the notice that somebody was departing. They were carrying the remains back to the States. So we'd always stand up and, do that. So I decided then I'm going to honor these guys. So when I come back, the original project, as I told you, was a display case that we wanted to put together. A citizen can put it together. We would send it out to a designated area, and a presenter would notify the family and say, where would you like to have this presented? And they would tell us either a cemetery, at a community center, at their home, wherever the case. That project was funded and ready to go. All we had to do was get the names and compile everything. But we found out that out of everyone we lost in Iraq and Afghanistan, that nearly 45% did not sign a key piece of paper when they joined the military. It was called third-party disclosure, which meant that if something happened to them on the battlefield, their records were sealed. And we could not get any information regarding next of kin, because I'd get casualty reports from the respective branches, but they would have to redact all of the people that did not sign. So I had a 57 Chevy pickup in my garage that was going to be a father-son project. So I said, I'll do this. That began remembering our heroes. My name is retired Air Force Master Sergeant Rick Beech. I served 20 years in the U.S. Air Force, followed by another 25 years with the Department of State. It included time in Afghanistan and Iraq. I lost 2 pilots in Afghanistan, and I decided to honor them and everyone we lost by building this 57 pickup. The signatures on it is when we took it on tour to 35 military bases, gathering signatures of returned combat veterans and veterans all the way back to the Korean War that's seen it. I lost two pilots. One was Captain Aaron Blanchard, and the other one was Lieutenant R.G. Hess. There were two pilots. They got on the FOB and never had a chance to fly a mission before we got attacked. In 2019, we took this on tour to 35 military bases as far north as Fort Drum, New York, gathering signatures along the way. We participated in the 4th of July parade in Washington and several other invited events as we gathered signatures along the way.
Who did the artwork for you?
The artwork was done here by Artistic Designs down in Palm Bay. His name is Dale Nemeth, and he's been a good friend of mine ever since, and you owe it all to him.
Beautiful work.
And I wanted to separate the look of the truck to identify both our fallen and our wounded warriors. So the doors, each door, the truck's separated down the center by Iraqi freedom and enduring freedom. And anyone that served in either of the campaigns, many signed that served in both, but anyone that served in the campaign, if he was a wounded warrior, they signed the doors in gold. Where the respective return combat veterans, they would sign it in alternating red and blue on the fenders, anywhere else on the truck. And it was designated by medallions up on the top by branch of service. So we took it to a respective military base, for an Army base, for example. Under the Army medallion, they would start signing it down the sides, on both sides of the truck. And if a family member saw it, they would sign in gold as well, but they would identify their loved one by the KIA sign and then the date of death. And then they would see the back as well. In the bed are 7,030 flags representing each of our fallen from 2001 until just yesterday by branch of service, including 11 Medal of Honor recipients.
What was the most recent signature? You know where it's at?
The most recent signature up front.
Right here.
You can't hardly see them, but that's all of the military honor guard at Patrick. Yes, when we built the truck, we received an engine from the father. His son was lost in Iraq, and he gave me the engine to put in the truck as a lasting memorial to him. It's a 350, put over 420 horsepower. It's run flawless ever since I put it in there.
Did you rebuild it?
I did,
You rebuilt it totally.
yes.
Beautiful. And the interior, how much work did you do on this? This is brand new.
The interior was done in Melbourne. Everything pretty much regarding the build of this truck was done in Melbourne. We kept it local, but I did it all.
It's a showstopper. Beautiful.
It was like everything came to me, what you saw in that truck, everything came as a vision. And do this, do this, do this. So that's pretty much how it was built. And then on 2019, after it was done, the first place that it was shown was here. And then we decided to take it on the tour, and I had returning combat veterans sign it to honor the guys that we lost. Sadly, it wasn't until after we come back off the tour that I added the 7,000 flags in the back so they could see the individuals. But now we have everyone represented in there by branch of service from 2001 until this past 2 weeks. By branch of service and by name, including Medal of Honor recipients and all of the troops. And if a person comes and looks at it and says, yeah, I knew someone from Iraq or Afghanistan, I can identify them position by date of death. And I would typically take the flag out, put the name on the back, put it back in. They could take a picture of it. But that worked out extremely well for Gold Star mothers and anyone that served in country that lost someone. And you'd be surprised, you know, how many, even here, just last weekend. Melvin Morris, one of the Medal of Honor recipients, was here. He signed it. My goal was to get all of the living Memorial Medal of Honor recipients to sign the dash.
Yeah, nice.
And at that point, it's done.
Yeah.
And then we decide the next step. Now, I've reached out to several museums. And so we're still in negotiations about, it's not that they don't want it, it's that they have to plan for something like that, to create an exhibit around it. And my goal was to have it exhibited in a museum and have a side area where people come in, sit down for a brief time, see the video, walk into a separate anteroom and see the truck with the angel wings and everything. And then the final thing would be, if any, regardless of who saw it, if they had someone they'd lost, they could walk up to a little kiosk, type in the name, and the flag will virtually raise up.
Huh? Very cool.
And they could leave a message on the cloud forever.
Yeah.
I think the highlight is going to be whenever the Global War on Terror Memorial was done in Washington, that people like me have done this. We can mass for the dedication and let the American people know that we've done this, waiting for this. So everybody's in eager anticipation of when that GWT memorial gets done. And it's pretty soon, I would say. Next couple of years it'll be done. But we'll see, you know.
Something to look forward to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't want this to become a forgotten war. We don't want this to be another Korea. We've never, in such a short period of time, lost so many soldiers like the Korean conflict. Although we were fortunate with our casualties here, it's still something that nobody wants to talk about. And there's the soldiers that come back from Iraq and Afghanistan are still harboring a lot of, it's all being held inside. Yeah. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing out there now. We all gather traumatic life events from the day you're born to the time you die. And everything that happens to you, we all carry a bucket. And every traumatic event, everything that happens goes into that bucket. And we all have ways of emptying that bucket. But sometimes it breaks, sometimes we break, and it builds up and it builds up, and then boom, you snap. My experiences as a paramedic firefighter, I saw a lot of things on the streets, but nothing prepared me for what I saw in wartime, to the devastation and to the extent. And it affected me. I mean, I come back and I lost here at Patrick, the rescue group there, one of the pararescue guys was in a helo accident, and he didn't make it. And that, to me, I had talked to this guy several months before here locally at the hardware store. I knew exactly who he was. I said, how does this happen? So that, for me, was the defining point. And I really had some concerns at that point about my own personal health. And I started reaching out as a medical person about what I needed to do. And fortunately for me, to be able to condense everything that happened to me, I projected it to that truck. But I can't say where I'd be if I didn't do that. I got Baker acted. And when I went to the VA, after I was out, the VA said that they couldn't help me because I made too much money. Threshold didn't work. And that was another defining moment. I said, my wife was with me. You know, we both looked at each other, and I said, well, okay, but what about all these other guys that are out there waiting that needed help? I didn't hold any grudges. Because I knew I had an out, my therapy was that. I can't say with all 100% honesty that what they would have provided me would have put me where I am now, but that certainly did. And every time I'm a little bit concerned, I'll work on that truck. That'll bring me back to reality. And once again, I mean, whether you use this or not, I'm not prepared to say, but when that event happened, it was at my house, and that truck was in the garage. And they saw that truck. And they knew. So here we are. That's 7 years ago.
Well, through the process, I think to honor veterans, to honor the fallen, wounded warriors, it's so important. And to keep the whole concept of honoring veterans, inclusive of the past and the future, to have any kind of memorial or something tangible, something tactical, you can actually understand it better, feel it, touch it, and get closer to it, is important, because we're all about telling some stories verbally and on video, but having memorials and things for education, for honoring, legacy, those are the things that have to coincide and be reminders, right? And
Exactly.
I think we're so aware of the fact of not enough people appreciate or understand or aren't educated on what our veterans and our service is all about, and our military service. So we applaud you, we salute you, sir, for your service personally and what you're doing for honoring all of those veterans and have come and gone and are still with us in their suffering. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really great.